Welcome to Empowered by AI, the podcast for women entrepreneurs ready to harness AI to take their businesses to the next level. I'm your host, Michelle Muncie Silva, founder of Innovative AI Studios. You may have left corporate life to start this entrepreneurial journey, but you don't have to go it alone. Here, you'll find a supportive community of like-minded women and an invaluable thought partner each week, as my guests and I share actionable insights you can use right away. So let's dive in together. Miss Marcia, I would love to introduce you to our friends. You are an absolutely multi-hyphenate individual. You have deep experience in ethics, law, leadership, and wellness, because apparently you have more hours in the day than the rest of us.
Not really. Not really.
Today, we're going to zoom in on generative AI, and I know it probably touches on a lot about that, but why don't you give us a little bit of background about you first?
I think you pretty much said it all, but from the purposes of AI, I got interested in AI several years ago, back before people were thinking about generative AI, because as your listeners probably know, it's been around since the 50s. And we've been using it in ways that we're not even aware of. But as it relates to generative AI, I started getting very interested in it right after ChatGPT first came out. And I was asked to speak at a conference for Microsoft on technology and human rights, to do a keynote on that and a big conference they were having. And I started talking about ChatGPT and what I thought it might do to education for all kinds of things. And so ever since then, I've been focusing on AI governance, ethics, privacy, what regulations should look like. And I'm super passionate about the topic.
And I'm interested in your personal definition. How do you define ethical AI use when it comes to small businesses, entrepreneurs?
And so I think it just means using the technology to advance whatever your mission is without ever compromising your values or anyone else's humanity. So every business should have a mission statement, a value statement, but most people don't, especially small businesses. But if you're a solopreneur or entrepreneur, you've already thought about what you will and won't do, where your ethical lines are. You've got to bring that to AI use as well. So think about how transparent are you when you use AI? How are you protecting the data? If you have a diary and you protect that with your life, protect that data, whether it's somebody else's, your customers, or your own. And think about regular bias checking. Just like you reconcile all your books at month's end, do a bias check on a regular basis. So when I think about ethics, if it helps you better, if AI helps you better, helps you serve the people you serve better, but you can also sleep well at night, then you're on the right track.
And you framed that so beautifully when you were a speaker at AI Renaissance. You did that "what would you do" format, and I think it really sparked some thinking. Why do you think it's so important to frame it in that way when it comes to ethics?
One of the things I do is I teach about ethics and technology, and it can be super theoretical, but you don't really feel it. It doesn't really stick until people feel that tension. So not when they hear a lecture. So if I ask you, would you keep 90% of your team, or would you fire 90% of your team if an AI algorithm promised double the profit and it's make or break time for your business? Then you really think about it, as opposed to something very ethereal about human in the loop. And let's think about ethics. You're like, oh, this is my business. I don't know, what would I do? And sometimes it forces us to make some hard choices. So that gut check is step number one. And then you slow down and ask yourself, who wins, who loses, and what might headlines look like if something came out about your business? So when you shift from instinct to be able to reflect, it helps you get an integrity reflex. And then you can rely on, because really integrity and ethics is what happens when no one is watching. And when I did the AI Renaissance event, I have this kind of framework that I call EDGE, right? So the end goal, this is your E. Does this serve my mission, or is it just serving the bottom line? And again, there's nothing wrong with the bottom line. We all need that. We've all got bills to pay, right? But is it serve that mission? That's why I asked at the beginning, what is your personal mission? What is your value statement? D, for the data. Are you collecting data? Are you collecting what you need? And are you guarding it like it's cash, right? Your G, for the governance. Who's the adult in the room that's reviewing the AI's work before it goes live? And we're seeing, I mean, in my profession, we're seeing very big firms sending things out with citations that they didn't check. And you think they would know better. So if the big law firms are doing it, we've got to be, as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, even better at it. And then E, what's that ethical impact? Who could be harmed even if you didn't intend to? And a lot of times we don't stop and think about those things.
No, that's true. Having a framework like that is so vital. How do you think entrepreneurs can keep that in mind and balance that with wanting to be innovative with their AI
So
strategies?
whenever I think about innovation, I think about things like design thinking, and it's another thing that I teach. So I love the concept of design thinking, especially for entrepreneurs. So think of ethics as a design element in your service or your product, right? So in design thinking, you start with empathizing. Start with the people, that your AI is going to touch, your customers, your employees, bystanders. You kind of map up what their hopes are and the potential harms. You also define in design thinking. So thinking about ethical user stories. For example, as a cash-strapped solopreneur, I need marketing copy that's bias-free so I don't alienate half of my audience. You ideate when you do design thinking. So brainstorm the features and the guardrails together. So think about, how can I hit this goal with less data, more transparency, or a human double check? Your prototype. So we talk about an MVP, a minimal viable product. Think about that minimum ethical viable product. So include audit logs, some kind of off switch, clear disclaimers right from version 1 of your product. And then you test, run some bias fire drills. Think about the end users and document what's breaking, and then you iterate. So for entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or business people who are used to design thinking, when they're trying to make their product or service better, you can turn it the same way with an ethical lens.
And you've talked as well about the mental health impacts that digital technologies can have. And I'm really curious what as potential mental health risks associated with AI use, and how do we even begin to mitigate that?
So right now, everybody wants to look like an expert, and it is exhausting keeping up with everything. And people are anxious and they want to preserve their jobs. Many companies are going AI first. And a lot of times, solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, they also have a 9 to 5. So imagine you're dealing with your 9 to 5 and you're trying to start your business and you're trying to learn something new. And every 2.5 days, a new model comes out. It is exhausting. And our brains are not designed for this constant digital input. And then we multitask, which is a productivity myth because it actually slows down your thinking. So I try to think about it in terms of, there's a concept of system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking, you're going super fast. System 2 thinking, you're slowing down. Sometimes we have to slow down when everything is really speeding up. So everybody that's listening to you that's interested in AI has gotten into the trap of falling down a rabbit hole. And you're looking at one thing, and then 4 hours later, you're realizing you haven't gone to the bathroom, you haven't eaten it, anything like that. So think about no AI after a certain time, just like with social media, just like with our phone. When you're doing heavy into AI work, rotate it with some kind of human creativity break, whether it's going outside, adult play, singing, dancing, something. It's actually going to help reset your brain so you can be more productive, because I am also a neuroscience nerd. Right. And then focus on one thing at a time. It's really easy to have on my Windows, I'll have ChatGPT, I'll have Claude, I'll have all these 6 different things open, and I'll go back and forth. It's really actually not pretty good for you because your brain is not really meant to multitask. It is a huge productivity myth. I think if you're feeling really overwhelmed, you got to pause and reframe and say, break it down into small chunks. I can manage this. And sometimes just breathing, taking a step away, just taking some deep breaths, surprisingly can be really good. It's good for your brain, and it's helpful to help reduce the stress and reduce that overwhelm, especially if your AI gets glitchy and you get frustrated like that.
Yeah, you made me take a deep breath right now.
I do it all the time lately with this latest version of ChatGPT acting wonky. It's making me very frustrated. And that's the other problem from a mental health perspective.
Right?
I think some people like me that are kind of power users, we get frustrated when 2 years ago, I didn't even have this tool at my disposal. I would just do things myself. And sometimes I get frustrated and I'm thinking, has this taken over? And I have to just step away for a few hours and do something else.
Yeah, I love the idea of getting outside, stepping away, and just take a breath, reframe, walk away. You're not going to be throwing your computer across the room. That's not healthy.
Exactly.
Do you think, speaking of glitches in the machine, do you think that there's like specific prompts or questions that we need to have in our repertoire? We should be asking AI to stress test for bias, for fairness, for accuracy?
Absolutely. And I've been playing around with some of these because I was doing another project and I wanted to see how things work out. So for example, if I type in, I use different things. I want to say, give me a picture of a female law professor. It will never come up with a Black female law professor. Or just if you say law professor, it's almost always going to be a white male. It will very rarely be a female and it will never be a Black female. So we got to think about intersectional swaps. So maybe it's rerun this analysis for a 55-year-old Latina entrepreneur, a 30-year-old Black male founder, and a non-binary disabled business owner. Highlight any differences in the recommendations, right? You'll see that it will come. So if you put your query in and then you add these different intersectional groups in, you might get different information. That might show there's some unintended bias. You might say, give me two different outputs for the same business facts, one assuming the owner is a male and one assuming the owner is a female. Explain any differences. List the top 5 factors driving your recommendation and show the weight, the data source, and any demographic coverage gaps. So you want to think about these kinds of issues. Give me 3 realistic harm scenarios, financial, reputational, legal, that could arise if I follow this advice without human review, and rank them by severity. So these are the kinds of things you might stress test in a different way for your business, but you're going to put these things in. Who might be negatively impacted by this advice? And why is it my direct customer? And who isn't that my direct customer or employee that might be impacted? Give me 2 stakeholder groups and the nature of the risk, because we don't ask these questions. And when you ask these questions, you want to log what those outputs are and score them and revise or escalate. So remember, I went back to that design thinking. You're going to prototype, you're going to test, you're going to iterate and think through these. And eventually it's going to become second nature that you're going to be doing bias testing as a normal part. It's not going to be a chore. It is going to be basically your strategic quality assurance loop.
I absolutely love that. I imagine taking some of the questions that you just listed and developing a rubric of sorts.
Absolutely.
So if
and you can connect it to an API, or connect it to whatever it is that you have, and you train whatever model you're using to say, I want you to start thinking through this lens, because again, we're training it all the time.
That is absolutely amazing, because I'm almost thinking of like case donors, persona teams, or maybe if I'm creating a custom GPT for my business and I want it to really get to know my business, I'm including this as a series of expected questions with a rubric. Oh my God, that's the possibilities.
The possibilities are endless.
That is so juicy. Oh, that's so juicy.
And somebody like me thinks about this all the time, every day, because this is what I think about. The normal business person that's thinking about their P&L, they're thinking about their cash flow, they're thinking about their marketing, they're thinking about their social media plan, isn't doing this. So we have to train ourselves to remember to ask these questions. So if you make it automatic, we don't have to think about it anymore.
So this is why it's so important to talk to you. I love it. So you actually have talked about in a previous LinkedIn post some concerns you have about people being ready for things like this. What you would realize once you hear it, wow, that's necessary. That is a vital part of any team that I build. If I'm going to build a team of AI agents, what do we need to be thinking about as foundational steps that we can take to build this AI literacy?
AI literacy is interesting because everyday things change, right? So people, depending on where people are, there's courses on Coursera, there's Microsoft has had courses, Google has been reputable things on YouTube. There's She Leads AI, which both of us are a part of, which is, I'm really thrilled because it's an organization that's meant to help women really step in to their power with artificial intelligence, because I believe that women have to lead this for a whole lot of reasons, which could be the source of a whole other podcast episode. But think about looking at no-code AI tools. I mean, at this point, you don't have to be a coder to play around with things. Use a low-risk task, right? And then start thinking about when did this work? What didn't work? What kind of wild ideas? And then be curious first, and then start investing your money. And again, join communities, join local tech meetups, but never be afraid to ask, quote, dumb questions, because everybody is learning. And I think the most important skill, yes, we absolutely need to have AI literacy, and we need to start that when the kids are really young. But don't forget those, quote, soft skills. So for those people listening and not watching your video, I've got the air quotes for soft skills, because those are the skills that are more critical than ever when we're dealing with disruption. And that doesn't just come from me. That comes from the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report. That's when basically the Illuminati of the world meet in Davos, presidents, business people, and decide the fate of the world. And every couple of years, they put out this Future of Job reports, the top 10 skills needed. And this is by employers and business people. Most of them relate to these, quote, soft skills. This is analytical thinking, number one among employers. 7 of the top 10 companies consider essential. That's followed by resilience, flexibility, agility, leadership, and social influence. So we can learn all the tech skills we want, but as we are thinking about how are we going to manage agents, what does it look like for an AI world, a post-labor economics world? What does this all look like? These soft skills, we talk about the human in the loop, are even more important.
And how do we assess as a solopreneur or as a small business owner? You've pointed out, I don't necessarily think with this same lens that you're bringing to the table. How do I assess my readiness to integrate AI into my business ethically as well as effectively?
I think you do, just like every business should do, a gap analysis, right? What is the quality of the data? Where are you getting it from? And how are you using it? What are the gaps in your talent pool? Who are you hiring and who are you working with? What regulatory exposure do you have? And that's a little difficult right now because rules and regulations are all over the place. And then customer trust. And if you were to do a gap analysis and kind of figure out where you were, if you think you score low in 2 or more of these areas, then you need to slow down and shore up before you start scaling to go more. But when you're thinking about readiness, if you don't have this, it's table stakes to have these basic things before you think about automation, before you think of AI. I love AI and business. I worry that too many people are jumping in without thinking about some of the fundamentals first, the fundamentals of their business, the fundamentals of who's working for them, again, where they're getting their data, do their customers trust them, and are they confident that they can think through an ethical lens and that they will be comfortable maybe sacrificing some financial gain for a short term because you want to do it right.
And I know you brought up that one of the places that you're learning and having these conversations is in community. Are there specific resources? I know we already brought up She Leads AI. Are there other communities that you would recommend as well for entrepreneurs that want to stay informed, they want to stay engaged with these types of conversations?
I like AI Salon. I mean, there's just so many, and every day new ones come up, but I don't want to vouch for other kinds of organizations that I am not directly part of. I'm part of some that are very niche that relate to either women or people of color or lawyers, because I think it's really important also that you go with people from a business perspective that have similar businesses to you, right? So the issues that lawyers are dealing with AI are very different than the people who have a Shopify store, for example. Very different kinds of issues. So there's some that are baseline, but figure out what people are doing in your industry, and that's where I would start. Small Business Association has a guide to AI. It's very basic, but they have a glossary. And I think I mentioned that there's free courses, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Microsoft, others. NIST has AI risk management framework, and they have workshops for people at all levels. So there's lots of different ways. There's a lot of information out there. Again, it's a matter of finding organizations that you trust. And more importantly, not getting so overwhelmed by the information, because it can be enough to just make you more stressed when the thought is that AI is supposed to help you be less stressed in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that has helped me the most with that is the conversation, because if I'm reading something or I'm exposing myself to a document, that's where I get, oh my God, all these people, they already know all this stuff and I'm just learning it. But it's in the conversations that you have with the other people in the room, whether it's a virtual room or an in-person room, that help me slow down a little bit, as well as feel like, oh, okay, hey, I'm not alone in feeling it this way. I'm hearing a lot.
And that's really important, right? Because you have to be comfortable saying, I don't know this. And I don't know this yet, by the way. Let's reframe it for the brain, because it's so easy to get overwhelmed, to feel stupid, to feel like I'm an imposter. I don't really know this. Most people are now getting up to speed. And people who are listening to your podcast, by definition, are already ahead of most people. because at least they're interested, at least they're thinking about it. And as we're looking at the reports that are coming out in the news about entry-level jobs going away, middle managers going away, the knowledge workers suffering, we've all got to keep up with it. But that's why being in community and talking to other people and getting ideas and collaborating, there is so much need for knowledge that this is the time to collaborate and not to compete.
And I think that as people are listening to this, they're going to want to collaborate with you. So I'm wondering, what's next for you in this space? Is there anything that you're excited about right now in the intersection of AI and ethics?
I'm also an employment lawyer by trade, and we talked about agents before, and there'll be swarms of super agents, and agents will be managing agents. All that means is that if these agents are acting like employees or supervisors or managers, then some law needs to think about it, right? How will employment law change? Can an agent harass a person? Can agents harass each other? What does it mean? And so those are all things that I think are really interesting. So I'm looking at that from a policy perspective because I think regulators have to think about this. I'm working on a book on ethical leadership in a time of disruption using neuroscience and behavioral economics principles. And I'm also passionate about, again, thinking about AI in the future of work. How does education need to change from K through 12 to higher education? AI and human rights. We talk about community. Last night, I was as part of She Leads AI. There was a book club meeting, and we were talking about how AI might actually exacerbate poverty and make things worse for certain people in the global South. And then also what AI regulation could look like and should look like in the future.
Yeah. And these are such vital conversations. And I agree with you when you said earlier, women really need to be in the forefront. So thank you so much for introducing us to this reference point. And I am so very much looking forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for tuning in to Empowered by AI. If today's episode sparked ideas, don't wait. Follow the link in the show notes to visit innovativeaistudio.com and download your free resource, created to help you put today's insights into practice. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes packed with more tips, tools, and inspiring stories. Until next time, stay empowered and keep innovating.